Hey everyone, good afternoon.
This call is being transcribed. This call.
Can everybody online hear the room here in Bismarck?
Yep.
Yes.
Start by taking roll of members present. This is co-chair Ryan Norrell from the Office of the Governor. Senator Lee, I think I saw that you were online. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. Would you take roll so that the rest of us know who else is there? I mean, I know I can go into others, but I'd like a face with a name.
Yep, we can do that. Representative Miskog, are you present as well?
She is on the call, but it looks like she's muted.
Okay. We're showing Representative Miskog on the call, but muted. Judge Romanek.
He's absent today.
And Veronica Dietz. Sorry.
Okay.
Carlotta McCleary.
Here.
Scott Burlingame. Here. Present. And
President. Present.
Present and president.
Yeah, I guess.
Jana Johnson, our executive director, is present as well. And then while we go around the table,
Sure, here for Melissa.
Permanent Bismarck. Stephen Beard from Williston.
Brittany Hansen, Bismarck.
Susan Dingle, Bismarck.
and online, could we have, I don't know, Jana, are you able to see who's online and they can maybe just give a quick.
Yep, I'll just call people out if that's okay, just going by who's on. Angie, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, my name is Angie Bosch and I'm with Freedom Resource Center in Fargo.
Brenda Schmid.
Hello. Hi, I'm Brenda Schmid and I'm on the advisory council. I live in Fargo.
Deneen. Deneen Feist. George, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm George Zank, a parent of a young adult who is in need of community-based services that provide services to medically fragile.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Jennifer Henderson. I'm with North Dakota Housing Finance Agency.
Kirsten?
The Kirsten Dvorak, Arc of North Dakota.
Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren, and I'm with the Disability Rights Section at the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice.
Senator Lee, Matt Schwartz?
Yes, this is Matt. I'm in Bismarck. I'm here with my daughter Jessica.
Thank you. Melanie?
Hi, Melanie Beebe. I'm Director of Public Policy for the Alzheimer's Association in North Dakota.
Nathan?
I'm just here on my own, just self-advocate.
And then can I remind everybody who's not speaking to mute, please? Thank you. Sam? Samuel Bondi? it.
All right. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 2, approval of the agenda, and also the approval of the May 2023 meeting minutes.
So there was a last minute change on the first agenda that went out. Our speaker wasn't available, so Lauren is joining us from the Department of Justice today instead.
This is Veronica. I'd move to approve the most recent agenda.
This is Scott. I will second.
A motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. The agenda has been approved. Now, May 23 minutes.
This is Scott. I'll move approval.
This is Veronica. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed,
Aye.
same sign. May 23 minutes are approved. With that, I think we'll turn it over, if it's okay, Jana, to introduce Lauren from DOJ.
Sure, yes. So I will let Lauren introduce herself, but she joins us from the Department of Justice to talk about the Olmstead update.
Thank you, Jana, and thanks everyone for having me to this meeting. Are you all able to hear me okay? Is there an echo or anything?
No, we're good, thank you.
Okay, great. So I will quickly introduce myself. I am an attorney in the Disability Rights Section in the U.S. Department of Justice. I work in Washington, D.C., and I actually see some familiar faces because I am also on the team that works with the state of North Dakota on the enforcement of the settlement agreement between North Dakota and the U.S. DOJ. So it's good to see all of you. I am going to see if I can pull up my, I need to pull up my PowerPoint. Just a second here. I apologize. I need just a minute. I'm trying to get into presenter mode, and I have not done this before on Teams.
Lauren, on the top, can you see share screen with an arrow up button?
Yeah, I do, but my only options are screen and then window.
That is correct. So you want to put your PowerPoint in the screen you want to share, and then it'll in the where it's showing up as the presenter mode.
Okay. Let's see. And
There, we can see your screen, Lauren.
okay, and then can you also see my notes?
Yeah, we can see your notes too.
I was hoping. Not have everyone see my notes so that I can present, but
You can email it to me if you want, and I can share my screen.
okay, that would work.
Isn't presenter mode far to the right?
Thanks so much. Was that Jana?
Yes.
Okay. Stop screen sharing. I apologize, everyone. I usually use Zoom, So I haven't done this before. All right. And I just sent that to you.
Okay, I'm just waiting for it to come through here. It hasn't come through yet.
Okay. I'm reading. I'll just go ahead and share my screen. And Jenna, if you do get it, you can let me know and start sharing. Okay.
If you,
right.
Lauren, if you go to just like slideshow and start from there, it should take your notes off for our view.
Yeah, so I did. I think the notes are off now.
Okay.
Okay. So apologize for not there. I thought I had this out. So today I am going to present on some of the recent work that we've done on the Olmstead team here in the disability rights section. I'm going to be in particular talking about a specific case, United States versus Florida, which is our most recent case and is actually only the third Olmstead case to be tried by the United States. So it was pretty exciting. And then doing so, I help you all understand more about Olmstead itself and the law surrounding it, but also to understand the work that we do with states, the work that we do with communities, and our role in enforcing the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm going to assume that people have some familiarity with the ADA. I know a lot of you have a lot of familiarity with the ADA, but I am going to start with just some basic background sort of around the presentation. So as many of you likely know, the ADA prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in employment, in state and local government, and in public accommodations. And Title II, which is where Olmstead falls, is in this middle bucket, state and local government. So one of the things that Title II does, as you likely know again, is prohibiting discrimination in the provision of services, activities, things like transportation, accessible buildings. But another thing that Title II does is prohibit discrimination in the form of segregation. And Title II's integration mandate is the part of the title that does that. That mandate requires that services, programs, and activities are administered in the most integrated setting appropriate. And what that means is one that enables disabilities to interact without disabilities to the fullest extent possible. And essentially, in real life, what that looks like is people with disabilities interacting with their communities, going to school, going to work, just like someone without a disability. And public entities, state and local local governments have an obligation to make sure that they provide services in a way that allows people with disabilities to do that, to be integrated into their communities. We refer to the integration mandate sometimes colloquially as Olmstead. And the reason for that is a Supreme Court case called Olmstead versus that was decided in 1999. And in that case, the court looked at the integration mandate.
Lauren, could I interrupt you for just a minute? Your audio is really choppy right now. Is there a way you can get a better connection?
Another 10 minutes.
I'm so sorry. I will call in so that I can get a better audio.
Thank you. We're just letting you in, Lauren.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. We will try this again. Is this better?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm not sure how much of that you all heard, but I was explaining that what we refer to colloquially as Olmstead is comes from a court case called Olmstead versus LC. And in that case, the Supreme Court held that under the integration mandate, public entities must provide community-based services to people with disabilities when those services are appropriate for the person, when the person doesn't oppose getting services in the community, and then when the state or the public entity can reasonably accommodate providing those services to the individual in the community. Okay, so now I will get into our case called United States versus Florida. This was decided on July 14th, 2023, and it was tried in May of this year. So to provide you a little bit of background on this case, this has been a really, really long time coming. We received complaints in 2011 from individuals in Florida. And what those complaints said was that they or their children who have complex medical needs or are medically fragile could not access the services that they needed to live in the community. And as a result, many of them were forced to enter nursing facilities for children. The state at the time had, I think, 6 nursing facilities for children. And so there were hundreds of children who were living there full time, and others were at serious risk of having to enter a nursing facility because they couldn't get services at home. And those services include things like private duty nursing, that's a huge one. It also includes care coordination, transportation, all of the things that allow people to live in their communities. So at the point we received the complaint, we opened an investigation, and that's typically what happens once we receive a complaint from someone in the community. In this case, we thought the complaints had merit, and so we decided to look into them. And you might be wondering why it took from 2011 to 2023 to actually get to the point where we were trying the case. And the reason for that is essentially that these kinds of cases often take a really long time to go through the court system. And there were many procedural setbacks in this case. And that's part of why we really try, to the extent we can, to avoid going to court and working with states or local governments in order to negotiate and try to resolve the allegations of discrimination whenever we can. I'm not going to walk you through all 10 years of what happened before we actually went to trial, but I do want to highlight the people who were important to this case, because I think that it really demonstrates how much we rely on individuals with disabilities, their families, and advocates in the community to make sure that our cases are meaningful and that we really understand what's happening before we bring a case or try to even negotiate with a state. So I'm going to talk about a few of these folks in the pictures. This guy right here, his name is Caden. He lives in Florida. This is his dad, and this is his stepmom. Caden had a near drowning incident when he was just a very small baby. And after that happened, his father was essentially told that you have two options. You can bring him to one nursing facility, or you can bring him to this other nursing facility. And so his dad did what he thought he had to do and placed him in a nursing facility. And Caden was there for 9 years. Before he came home this past May. This little girl here, her name is Olivia. She, as you can see, uses a trach. She lives in the community with her mom, who is a single mom. And Olivia is an example of a child who was at risk of institutionalization because her mom had very few natural supports. She was not able to access reliable nursing services, and so she was actually at risk of losing her own job to be able to stay home with her daughter Olivia and make sure that she had the care that she needed. This in the corner here, these are the red weave guys. This is Karina, the little girl. She's currently in a nursing facility. Her parents, and she has been there all her life. Her parents want her home. They have actually a whole room set up with like all of the supplies that she needs, but they've been told over and over that if they bring her home, they won't get access to nursing services. And so for reasons I'm sure many people can understand, they are, scared to do that and risk that she won't get the services she needs. I will just add, so all of these people are people that we've been working with for 10 years or so. Many of them we connected with through the Protection and Advocacy Organization in Florida. That organization was a huge part of this case. They not only connected us with the people that had information, but they were also huge advocates for tackling this issue. It was something they'd been aware of for a long time and fighting to change, but they face some limitations, and that's something that we see at times, is that protection and advocacy organizations and other advocacy organizations do face some limitations, either in terms of resources or in terms of for sort of legal reasons, what they're able to do in the court system if it gets to that point. And so they'll often reach out to us and work with us to try to resolve the issue. So we finally went to trial in 2023. We needed to prove 3 elements of our Olmstead claim. They are appropriateness, non-opposition, and reasonable modifications. You can see here, this child's name is Dalton. His mother testified in court, and he lives in the community. He is a great example of how children with medical complexity can live in the community with the right services. His mom is a fighter for sure and super determined to get him the services that she needs, and also has been fortunate enough to connect. And so by her providing testimony and saying, hi, my son has, this diagnosis and this diagnosis, and he lives in the community, we were able to argue that the children who live in the nursing facilities with the same conditions can also live in the community. We had many more families testify. The testimony that I wanted to highlight is testimony that shows that families want their children at home. And, this is probably not a surprise to anyone. In many cases, it was really straightforward. Families had been working for months or even years actively to try to get their child out of a facility, but faced barrier after barrier. In other cases, it was a little more complicated. You can see here, some individuals didn't ask about community options, didn't try to get their children out of a facility because they didn't know what the community options were. I think that the last bit of testimony down there, I can't ask questions about something I don't know about, really gets to the heart of that issue, is that people were just not provided the information that they needed, or were under the misimpression that children with the medical complexity that their own children have just can't live in the community, which is just objectively not true. We also had a number of experts testify. This is another great example of how our community connections are super, super important. We were able to find experts in pediatric medicine and pediatric complex care who are at the top of their field. I should say pediatric and adolescent, so going up to 21. These individuals we connected with through, partly through the P&A as well, and through other recommendations. And they were able to testify that in their work, they treat children with medical complexity in the community, that children thrive in the community, that all children belong at home and with their families, and that families want their children at home. A argument that the state put forth
Lauren, did you get muted?
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah, I
okay,
got
okay.
muted. I just took myself off mute. Yep. I was saying that an argument that the state made was that, it's too dangerous for children to live in the community if they, for instance, rely on a
She felt something on her leg.
Oh, yes. Can I interrupt you, please? There are people online or in the room who have their mics active, and that means anything that we all hear in our own surrounding is coming through to everybody else, and we cannot hear the speaker. So please, if you are online, mute your audio, and if you're in the room, turn your microphones off so that the speaker is able to give us that information that we'd like to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. I was saying that one thing that the state and some of the physicians actually who testified for them argued was that it is dangerous for children with medical devices like a tracheostomy or who rely on a ventilator to breathe to live in the community. And, you can kind of imagine, if you're not familiar with these services and with these, with children with medical complexity, it may seem daunting to think about, how do I get a child out of the hospital into a home, or how do I get a child out of a nursing facility into a home? But what we know now with advances in medical technology is that it's not only very possible for children to live at home, it's safe with the right equipment and with the right services. and it is developmentally absolutely the best place for children to live. And we had the privilege of having experts who really are at the forefront of their fields. Dr. Mary Ellenbach, who's highlighted here, is an example. She works in Wisconsin, and she runs a clinic for children with complex medical needs who live in the community. And in fact, not a single child in her state lives in a facility. And part of the reason for that is that they don't have facilities, but another reason is that they've made the decision that when a child with medical complexity can't live at home for whatever reason, just like sometimes children without disabilities can't live at home and enter foster care, children with disabilities get the same opportunity to enter foster care so that they don't have to go to a nursing facility instead. And the judge was very candid with us that he found that testimony very credible and agreed with our assessment that the community is where these children belong. So the trial was 2 weeks. It ended on May 19th, and we actually got a surprise. Typically, you know, the case ends, we do closing statements, and we don't hear anything for a month or months about how the judge is going to rule. The judge very clearly, his name was Judge Middlebrooks, and he was appointed by George W. Bush. He works in the Southern District of Florida. He very clearly felt passionately about this. Sorry, did somebody have a question? Okay. So he very clearly felt passionately about this, but he also, you know, he was very reasoned and gave us sort of a preview of his legal opinion, and let us know that he was going to conclude that the children living in nursing facilities could live in the community with appropriate services and supports, and that largely their parents wanted them at home with a few exceptions. And that there were things that the state of Florida could do to make that possible so that children don't have to be institutionalized. And this here, you know, to follow up, as I said earlier, this is Caden with his parents. Caden was able to go home at the end of May, and he is now at home. He lives with his mom, or his stepmom, his dad, and his little sister, and he is doing great. This is a little bit of the order that eventually came out in July. This was the written order. It's about 79 pages, very long, but these quotes give you an idea of the judge's conclusions. He is essentially saying that these children belong in the community. There's no reason they need to be in an institution, and that, you know, this is a form of discrimination. I think I'll just highlight the last quote, which is that unjustified institutionalization of individuals with disabilities is unacceptable, especially given the advances in technology and the provision of home-based care. Any family who wants to care for their child at home should be able to do so. And that was really, that last bit was really the crux of our argument, right? Is that this is about giving families meaningful choices about where their children live. No family should have to feel forced to put their child in institution just to get by. As part of the opinion, the judge ordered specific remedies. So one of the things that he required the state to do is to engage in more meaningful oversight of the managed care organizations in Florida that deliver services. So they're the ones who contract with local providers to deliver Medicaid services, home and community-based waiver services. And the state at this point had not been really enforcing its contracts that say, okay, if you agree to provide a child with 24 hours of nursing services, you have to provide that child with 24 hours of nursing services. So they have to hold the MCOs accountable. Another part of the order is that the state has to provide complete and accurate information to parents. And again, that is about facilitating meaningful choice. We're really clear, we want to respect the choices of parents and guardians, but they can't make an informed choice if they don't really understand what their options are. And unfortunately, that was the case for many parents. The state was also ordered to provide child-specific transition plans. Many children had been living in facilities with no transition plan in place for many, many years. Caden is a great example of that. A few years ago, his dad found out that he could bring Caden home and started telling the nursing facility, hey, I want my child at home. How do I do this? And he was never really told what needed to happen. He engaged in training about how to, take care of Caden's trach and other things. But there was never a solid plan in place that included specific steps that he would need to bring him home. And the judge is now requiring that the state provide that to every child, so that as soon as a parent says, hey, I want to take my kid home, as soon as they get options counseling and say, yep, I'm ready to do this, they are able to act on that. Person-centered care coordination is another big aspect of things. That's something that I know many, if not most of you, are familiar with. And then also he appointed a monitor who's going to provide objective review of the state's compliance for 2 years at least, and then at the end of 2 years could stay on longer. So this was, I will say, a huge victory, I think, not even for us as a department, but really for the disability advocacy community, and especially those who advocate for community integration. I mentioned earlier that the way that we found out about the things that were happening in Florida was through the P&A and through the individuals who filed a complaint with us at ada.gov. That is, I would say, the primary way that we find out about potential discrimination, not just in terms of Olmstead, but any discrimination, disability discrimination that might be happening, is through ada.gov. And so I would, let all of you know and encourage all of you to file a complaint through there if there are issues of discrimination that you're aware of, and that you haven't been able to resolve through other avenues. It's also a great way to just keep us apprised and educated. Most of the time when we get a complaint, we unfortunately can't take action because we get many, many of them. But we look at every single one, and when we feel that the issue is broad enough for us to get involved, we will look into it, and often we'll open a formal investigation. That's what we did in this case. After we do the investigation, if we find that there is in fact discrimination happening, we issue a letter of finding, and then we work with the entity to resolve the issue. And again, as I said earlier, only if we are absolutely unable to resolve it outside of court would we file a complaint and take legal action in that way. That is the end of my presentation, but I would like to open it up for any questions that people have about this case or about our work in general. Oh, I see Judy raising her hand.
Yes, thank you. I just wondered if you have familiarized yourself with what North Dakota has going on.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as I said earlier, I think, although I don't know if people could hear me, I am one of the attorneys with the DOJ who's been working with Nancy Nicholas Meyer on the enforcement of the settlement agreement between North Dakota and the DOJ. And as you know, that settlement agreement is specific to adults with physical disabilities and nursing facilities. But I am quite familiar with what North Dakota has going on that front. It's actually something that we're really proud of. I think I would say that we've come a long way. We've really grown in our relationship with Nancy's team, and I think they're doing incredible work in making some of the changes that needed to happen to get people more integrated into the community. Outside of the actions happening in that agreement, I am not familiar with the work that North Dakota is doing, but I would love to hear about it if there's anything specific that you all want to share.
Well, I've been a state senator for a long time and chair of human services since 2001. And as a result of a court settlement decades ago now, a facility which had been an institutional setting in Grafton, North Dakota, which at the time had 1,100 residents, now is down to a much smaller number, 63 to 65, which is in large part a transitional number. It has to be a safety net for those with behavioral issues, whether it's being sexually aggressive or physically aggressive. And so they may need to be removed from a community setting because they're dangerous to themselves or others. And then finding a place to place them again becomes difficult, in part because we have a terrible workforce shortage here. So, but there are people who, it's a small community kind of setting there. The houses that used to be used by the physicians at that facility are now group homes for folks with developmental disabilities. Very successfully done. The only facility of its kind that's recognized in the nation as an independent community facility in an institutional setting, because it's in homes that are located on a campus. What now is called the long-term, the life skills and transition center. But people will come in and out, and some of them are there just because of the challenges of their behavior for longer periods of time. The goal is to have as many people, obviously, as possible. The perfect goal is 100%, but that is almost impossible to achieve. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't have it as a goal. But we have had group homes long before many other states did. We have had extremely high level reviews when the feds have come through to look at the facilities that we provide for individuals with disabilities. And we work hard to make sure that it's done as well as possible. This last legislative session, we also funded, and it's just the beginning of the project, but to be able to reimburse with Medicaid family caregivers of medically fragile children, because they want to keep their children at home, and they are, but it's exhausting, and one spouse will have to give up work or other family members have to be engaged. And we want to make sure there's some compensation for that. So, there's a great awareness of it in North Dakota. We really try hard to make it work. And it's very challenging in a state where 36 out of 53 counties are frontier counties. That means fewer than 6 people per square mile. So workforce is not very available. And yet there are people in those communities who need those services. And we're trying hard to address that too. So there's a lot of work that has been done in the last 50 years, actually, to provide services to individuals with disabilities. The Ann Carlson Center does a wonderful job with medically fragile children and does a great deal of work with autistic children or individuals who are on the autism spectrum. They have a hospital type setting in Jamestown and building a newer building there with a small population, but they do a tremendous amount of outreach in the state as well, so that the families of children who are on the autism spectrum get good support, or other kinds of, I hate to say birth defects because that's not really it, that sounds physical, but that's part of it. Who are born with challenges of one sort or another. I know a young family who lives close to me, whose baby was recognized as having some challenges when he was born. And they usually began evaluating at 3 months. But in this particular case, they visited with the family and they did an assessment earlier, and they've been providing wonderful services to help them with exercises and other kinds of cool things to just engage him and to make he's still small physically, but to engage him and increase all of his abilities, because it's really hard to determine yet what kinds of setbacks he will encounter that are more long lasting and what things he might develop out of. But the point is, he has been at home since the beginning, and with the help of some grandparents too, has been able to make this work. But mom has been home because it's very hard to find quality daycare that can deal with special needs kids. And so that's a big rub for us here as well. So sorry I went on as long as I did, but that's sort of a nutshell of what's happened through a lot of the human services activities. And Nancy Nicholas Meyer does a fabulous job for older adults. Tina Bay handles the activities for those with developmental disabilities, but the whole Department of Human Services overall is engaged. Jessica Thomason oversees some of that. And so I think we have some good resources for you as well that can help find what we're doing and what we ought to do better.
Yeah, I took notes there, so thanks for sharing that. It really was helpful, and I think it kind of confirms what I believe after working with the state on, again, just the older adults aspect of things for a few years, which is, North Dakota is doing a lot of innovation. It's very clear that it's priority. And one of the things that we always hope if we enter a settlement agreement or work with the state in any capacity is that, we support the state in making changes, and then eventually the state can become a model for other places across the country, because we see these issues play out in different ways, but they do play out in every single state. And so I do think that North Dakota could be one of those model states, and already is in a lot of ways that you're describing.
Yeah,
Lauren.
Can I follow up on a couple of comments that Judy made?
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a son who's one of 7 individuals, and I'll mention the facility because she did, at the Ann Carlson Center, that are being transitioned out of youth services. They have been providing adult services, are transitioning back to their original mission. Since we were notified last March, and we started working in conjunction with them in a team effort and the State Department, DD people, to develop some transition plans. The settlement agreement is 2+ years old, and we still do not have services for medically fragile young adults in the state of North Dakota. I'm kind of wondering why. We've really gotten not much of a response from the state other than sending out some requests to all 8 regions. Nobody is willing to provide services other than one agency in Fargo indicated a slight interest. In our judgment after meeting with them, they are not prepared and are ill-equipped to meet the needs of the 7 individuals we're talking about. And I know of those 7 individuals because they're peers of my son at the Ann Carlson Center. And unfortunately, those parents have not been aware of the people to contact and the resources that I have been in touch with. We did continue the monthly meetings out of frustration because we've really gotten no comment from the state other than we're working on it, but there's no transparency. They're not telling us what they're doing or what's going on. And the interesting thing is what happened to this money follows the person concept of the law. My understanding is that money is sitting there and not a nickel of it has been spent. Now, there's something wrong with that process. And yeah, I'm a little frustrated. I've spent tons of hours. I've talked to the court monitor. I've talked to DOJ. I've talked to everybody up and down the ladder in human services. And, you have to force them to respond to you. That's a little frustrating. What happened to the, to the open communication concept? You may think it's there, but from the standpoint of the parents, it's not. We sit here today almost 3 years into the settlement, and we haven't done a thing in terms of providing services for medically fragile young adults. Now, I'm aware of 7, and I know that there are others in the state that are languishing in nursing homes still to this day and should not be. I'm at about our wits' end with the frustration and nearing the point where I'm meeting with those parents this Saturday, and I think we're at about the point where we're going to file another DOJ complaint.
May I respond, George? I'm sorry, I don't know your last name, George. Would you tell me, please?
George Zink, and
Zink?
I've known you for a long time, Judy, and I was working at the Grafton State School at the time of the original incident, the original lawsuit, and you know, I know the process well. I worked in the system for years. I'm retired now, and it, I guess only because I know some people in the various systems that I've kind of taken the lead and made some phone calls and contacted people, and I did learn some things the other day from the settlement monitor. I was not aware that he has no power to enforce anything. All he is a monitor that submits 2 reports annually to the DOJ.
That's what they do. That's what a monitor does. But
Right.
what I would like you to do, George, would you be willing to send an email to me with just the structure of this information? And then maybe you and I can communicate after this meeting is over, because I think we can have a chance to visit. Let me have a chance to visit with some of the people in the department, because there are some things that we can do to make some of those things better.
Well,
so please get it. Please, would you get in touch with me personally? That would be great.
I will absolutely do that, Judy. I've tried to talk to Tim Mathern in Fargo. I've talked to Tim and Katie. Is it Katie Hogan, the senator?
Kathy Hogan, maybe.
Kathy Hogan, yeah. And
she's good too.
They didn't even respond to me other than Tim. But you know, I spent this has become my life, 7 hours a day on the phone, you know, and it shouldn't be that difficult. But definitely, Judy, I will get in touch with you.
Rather than taking up everybody else's time with, I think you and I can perhaps find a way to move forward on this. So just get in touch. I'm going to be gone most of next week to a conference, but please send a message to me. And after that, then if we could communicate a little bit more about this, I'd appreciate that. And we'll see.
Sure.
If we can make something.
I need to have your phone or email.
Yep, my email address is in the website, jlee@ndlegis.gov.
jlee@nd.gov.
No, that's an old one.
George, I can put it in
JLEE.
chat.
I'll put it in chat, George. Would you look at it if I put it in chat?
Okay.
Okay.
Jana, maybe
That's
you
what
can
I'll
get
do.
it to me, or I can look it up.
Yep.
Thank you, Judy.
And George, this is Elisa Mitskog. Representative Mitskog, could I also be included in the correspondence with you and the information? So Senator
this?
Lee and I can, this is Representative Mitskog.
The two of us can work on
yeah.
this together. We're
Somebody-
half of the team, so we'll see what we can
Somebody
do.
needs to get me the emails. Jana,
can
do you
send
have
them
that?
to me?
Do that, please.
Jana, can you do that?
Elisa and I will take care of that. It'll be okay.
All right.
We'll do that.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
figure
you.
it out. Okay.
Sorry to go on a tirade, folks.
No, thank you for sharing that, George. I will just say, in terms of our settlement agreement, one of the things that we've tried to establish with the state is open lines of communication. And so when we hear from people like you who are having, challenges, significant challenges, it's something that we share, and I think that's been really welcomed by the settlement agreement team. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Well,
Any other questions?
just let me share another little bit of information. We were in a meeting with them the other day, and one of the things that I suggested was that The Ann Carlson Center is moving to a new campus. That campus they're in will be vacated. All the necessary physical structure and facilities are there that are currently caring for these 7 adults. All that would need to happen is the state would need to incentivize another provider, and there is one in Jamestown, that could lease, rent, or buy that facility and continue to provide to meet the needs of these medically fragile individuals. Ann Carlson, in my understanding, talking to the CEO, is willing to do that. I brought that up at a meeting, and the representative from the State Department chewed me out and told me that was not the appropriate place to discuss that. Well, now that's not being very open and transparent.
George, the only thing I want to say about that old campus is one of the reasons they're building the new one is because the old one has been subject to terrible flooding, and they do not want to have to evacuate these medically fragile children from a serious. We know what valley floods are like. I sure do. And
right.
So anyway, I'm sure the state isn't going to be terribly crazy about using that old facility, because one of the big reasons they're moving to the other one is because it's out of the floodplain, and that's a big deal. So that's another story for another day. Alyssa, and you and I will talk about that after this is all over. Okay.
Okay.
Any other folks have questions?
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, that's gonna be bad.
I'm getting an echo.
Is that better?
It won't echo if everybody turns off their audio.
We are happy.
I wasn't sure if that was my audio that was on that was causing that problem, but I muted and I still heard the echo. So I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, sounds like you're having audio issues in the conference room. If somebody was going to ask a question or make a comment, you can feel free to enter it into the chat too. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you, Veronica. I will go ahead and I've stopped sharing my screen. I will sign out so that you all can continue your meeting. Oh, it looks like you do have a question. Okay. Okay, so the question is, can you clarify who has the responsibility to provide services authorized or approved? Is it the provider or the state? It's a really good question. As far as a legal obligation and as far as the enforcement of the ADA goes, it is the state or the public entity. Oh, they're disconnected. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So in terms of, for our purposes at the DOJ, the responsibility is on the state. And how it works essentially is, states don't have an obligation to provide really any services. But if they do, then they have an obligation to provide those services in the most integrated setting possible, or appropriate. And so, what actually happens in reality is every single state provides Medicaid services. And once they make that decision, they're also making that commitment to provide them in an integrated setting. And so we have enforcement authority over governments, and essentially we say, okay, you're providing the service, you have an affirmative obligation to do it in an integrated setting, and to do is what's in your control, right? The providers might have an obligation under, for instance, contracts with MCOs or other, or the state if they contract directly with the state. But that is not where we come in.
Can you guys hear us now?
Yeah, that's better.
Perfect. Scott had a question. We finally got back online.
All right. Okay, Laura, I'm Scott. I'm on the Olmstead Commission here. And my question is looking at, Judge Middlebrook obviously serving the Florida area. I'm not a lawyer, is what I started to say earlier. I just sit next to a bunch of them. But how do the results of that Florida decision impact the rest of the states that aren't necessarily part of that judicial region?
Oh, that's a good question. So that's it's a statewide injunction. So the entire state is required to make the same changes. They all have the same obligations.
Were you?
So all states have that, or just Florida has that obligation?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misunderstood your question. As far as the order that Judge Middlebrook entered, it is just the state of Florida. And then there's another. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, I think like the point that Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, might be getting to is like, can that be used as like case law for setting a precedent for other states?
Yeah.
Because it is at the district court level, which is in terms of the federal court system, that's the lowest level. The order is only binding in Florida. That judge doesn't have authority to issue an order that would be binding in North Dakota, for instance. If the case got up to a higher level, the Court of Appeals, then it would be binding at a much larger region. And then, of course, the Supreme Court, anytime they issue a ruling like Olmstead, it is it applies nationwide.
Lauren, I have one other question.
Mm-hmm.
Title II of the ADA has a comment in it that concerns me, and it says whether the provider or the state can reasonably accommodate. Is that not an excuse for the state to say, no, we can't accommodate that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, George. So in our work, what that means is that, for instance, how it played out in our Florida case is a great example. Once we show that, or an individual shows that they can live in the community, that they're appropriate, or they can appropriately receive community-based services, that they want to be in the community, then the person bringing, for instance, a lawsuit, all they have to do is say, look, there are these plausible accommodations that the state could make that would likely make a difference, that would likely make community living more accessible. And then what happens at that point is the burden shifts to the state or the government entity. And at that point, the government entity has to come back and say, oh, no, the plaintiff is wrong, the person bringing this claim is wrong, we can't do that. It would fundamentally alter our system of services. And in the Olmstead, in the integration mandate context, that's actually pretty tricky to do. The states have to show that it would require them to, for instance, spend money that would take away from the services given to another group of people with disabilities, to the extent that it would put those people at risk of having to enter a facility, or that it would, require them to sort of revamp their whole service system to an extent that's really unreasonable. So it's more complicated than that, but it is, in the Olmstead context, actually not that easy for a state to say that accommodation isn't reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions from this group for Lauren?
There were a couple of questions submitted on the chat, Lauren. I'm not sure if you.
Yeah, there's one question in the chat. Can you expand on the at-risk population you discussed and that requirement for services and scenarios? So when we talk about the at-risk population, we're talking about people with disabilities living in the community and receiving community services but at serious risk of institutionalization. So again, to go back to Florida as an example, kids who are living with their families but unable to actually access the services that have been approved for them. And, that, again, that kind of happens nationwide. People are approved for services, and then for various reasons, whether it's staffing shortages or issues with authorizations, they have trouble accessing the services. And often that gets to a point where we hear from families all the time, I don't know what to do. Or individuals, right? Like, I need these services. I can't get them. I feel like I have no choice but to enter a nursing facility. And that's what we mean by the at-risk population. Those people are also covered by the ADA. And so again, for instance, in Florida, the order that the judge issued will apply to kids living at home. The state's requirement to make sure that they get the nursing services they need will affect those children as well, not just the children in the nursing facilities.
All right, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you all, and I appreciate your patience with me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and your feedback and questions. And I will see some of you at the settlement agreement stakeholder meeting soon.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren.
Bye. Welcome.
All right, why don't we, I've noticed a stream of people going in and out over the last 15 minutes. Why don't we take a 5-minute break, and then we'll be back about 2:22, 2:25.
Perfect.
been a long time ago. I just sent one out, yeah, I sent one out on 8/7.
Are we ready to get started?
That'd been
That's
Monday.
probably what he meant, yeah.
All right, we'll call the commission back to order. Before we move on the agenda, just some of you have seen Senator Lee's comments, and just a reminder, yes, we do have a public comment period at the ending of the meeting, and so if we could keep questions during the presentation, during the actual formal structure of the meeting to commission members, then we can respond or we can have comment at the end. This is, and by the way, this is Ryan Norrell, the chair. We're moving on to agenda item number 4A, which would be the Olmstead Plan Revision Update, and that would be the subcommittee members. And so, Veronica, are you?
Scott, I think.
Yeah, so that's me, Scott, Julie, Jennifer, Henderson, Jake and Kayla, and Jake and Kayla are at a training, so not here with us, but
I haven't made a meeting, so
you haven't. Julie, why don't you take it away? Start it off for us.
Sorry, I was having my afternoon gummy bear. This is Julie Horntevet with the DD Council. The committee for the Olmstead Plan Revision, we met with TAC, the provider of the research and the plan building, and to get us to a more formalized point where we can see goals, proposed goals or objectives to follow up on, we asked our contractor to do a crosswalk of various studies and the work that's already been done in North Dakota, so we aren't duplicating effort there, but really crosswalk Alvarez and Marcel, what are all of them? So many housing studies, money follows the person studies, all of the things legislatively too that have gone on this last session that impact people with disabilities, like looking at the proposed studies during the interim, to compare and contrast what's the same, so what is being addressed amongst disability populations in various areas, but also what's maybe different or lacking. And then they will provide us that report, which will be a little more clean and looking at all the various things that were already done. So we really want to be as inclusive as we can on everything that has been studied and looked at, and draw from all of that really more concrete examples. So we aren't trying to say, well, what about housing or this or that? We just want it all spelled out, and we spelled out those areas specifically for the contractor based on the Olmstead executive order. So that's what we're looking at across disability populations. So that's what they're doing now. The contract goes through November. They might not get to a point where they do the plan on our behalf. That might be the work we take up after, but it will be presented to us so the commission can look at those more finite examples. So that's what's going
on. And I know that Sherry from TAC has reached out to people that were potentially missed the first go around before that assessment was completed. Jennifer Henderson was one of those included for the housing, and it looks like she might have had to leave. I don't see her on this meeting anymore. But I think that summed it up well as far as what our next step is.
And MFP, money follows the person with transition data and stuff. They didn't have the most up-to-date data, and speaking with Medicaid and some other departments. So Jana got TAC new contacts to get more accurate data or newer data to build from and make sure that is right, because we felt really strongly about having the most updated information. So they're doing that too.
And with 1915I information, she didn't have stats on that the first go around, so they were connecting that as well.
Will we be expecting the information back at our November meeting, or would it be the meeting after that?
And it will be like in finalized form for approval, or?
Probably not.
I don't know.
Okay.
We would hope, but maybe this group can keep meeting with them to see how things are shaking out. And really, that's the goal, though, is to bring something that's really well done and looks complete so we can have a good conversation about it. But that is the end goal by November.
And our next subcommittee meeting is next week, I believe.
Is there any additional cost, or is this all covered under the original contract?
Yes, the only thing that might not be fully executed by the end is the plan, which was our original hope, is the plan would be done, and we might not get there, but this is within the cost parameters.
Senator Lee.
I wanted to mention that if you want 1915I information, you should talk to Pam Sagnis, the director of the Behavioral Health Division. And there is now a new director of Medicaid. Christoph Fremming is the one who was the interim director, and she is still there. But there's a new, I understand, very capable person whom I have not yet met, who has been a director in South Dakota. And I was just trying to quickly grab her name before I talk to you. But anyway, they know who it is in the department. So talk to them about the other issues that you were discussing that you hadn't been able to get updated information. Because it's there and it should be available to you. And if you can't find it, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions on this? There's no real action needed on this. It's just an update.
Just an update, yeah.
All right, and moving on, we will go to the inquiry process update with Jana.
Yeah, so I got the inquiry process defined, and the form to submit an inquiry is live on the North Dakota Olmstead website. I can put a link to it in the chat, but basically it says what the point of an inquiry process is, what we can do as a commission, what we can't do, and then the steps to submit a form or an inquiry if you would like to do that. The inquiries come to me to review, and then I think as a commission, we would just take a look at that to decide a plan of action after we receive those.
All right. Any questions, commission members, on the inquiry process?
This is Julie. Remind me, did we approve that, or do you need like a motion to approve? Okay, sorry.
So when we talked about it in May, I think we just said we were gonna, Veronica and I were going to clean up the process and then bring it to present. I don't know if anything needs to be.
Do you have a copy that you could share?
Should I?
Or yeah, if you're willing.
Should I share my screen?
Please.
Huh? Shared the wrong screen. There we go. So this is live on the website, olmstead.nd.gov. There's an inquiry drop down. The website is still very much a work in progress, just to put that out there. But it does give you an overview of what an inquiry is, what you can do before filing it. How do you file it? So this link here will take you directly to the form, which is very easy, fillable form. The topics here are the areas that are addressed in the executive order. You give a brief description and then it comes to me. On the inquiry process on the Olmstead website, there's a list of resources that are embedded here talks about what happens after you submit the form and then what can't the process do. So again, we're not giving legal advice and we're not an enforcement agency. But I think like Lauren commented, they will all be reviewed and looked at, and then we would take action if needed from there.
Do you want any, do you want a motion to accept that, or are we okay just leaving it?
Well, I'd make a motion, but I don't know that I should since I helped work on it, so it might be nice to formalize it.
Sure.
This is Scott. I'll make a motion to accept it as it was presented.
This is Carlotta McClary. I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second on accepting the inquiry process as presented. Do we have any discussion?
I think that, first off, thanks for the work on it. I think it's, you know, issues like that can always be tweaked, they can always be perfected, but it's just nice to have something and not to allow the perfect to get in the way of the good. So I appreciate the work you guys have done. I appreciate the fact that it's there and it's something to point at. So, and I also really appreciate the disclaimers at the end, because we don't want to give false hope that we're something we're not. We're not the, you know, Olmstead Police. We're just a commission. So.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of accepting the inquiry process as presented, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you, Jen and Veronica. Now, the advisory council comment. A newer section of.
This is a newer section of the agenda, yeah. So the advisory council will have a standing agenda item each meeting for comment and feedback. So Brittany, you can go ahead.
I have a couple questions I'll go backwards. Starting with the inquiry. The web page contradicts itself. First paragraph talks about, or the first couple bullets say you can't solve the problem for you. And it talks about being a referral source. But then at the bottom, it talks about doing an investigation. Can you clarify that? And then, and not to open a huge can of worms, but how is this dependent on PNA services? And will inquiries be shared with PNA?
So the first one, the saying that we are going to investigate, I'm not seeing.
Yep, it's.
The scope of an investigation will be determined on a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
So that's like investigating the concern or the point of the submission. So if people are reaching out, like George's comment, if he would do this, then I would follow up with a phone call, most likely.
Just, it gives an impression when there's an investigation that there'll be an outcome to that investigation, not just a referral to appropriate services. Is how I would perceive it. And then if anything is a suspected Olmstead complaint, and if it is in fact an Olmstead complaint, it would be PNA, fall under PNA. So how again is the commission doing things that are or are not duplicative of other mandated agencies that do have those processes already in place?
Can I field this one?
Mm-hmm.
This is Veronica, for those of you online. If you click through the form, it does ask a question about what they've already tried to do to address their issue and who they've contacted. So there is information in there that they should basically have tried to exhaust all of the avenues to get their situation involved. So if PNA had a case, the hope would be that if there was a grievance or a public inquiry having to do with that case, that we would try and resolve it as PNA. But if it is not solved to that person's satisfaction, then they could potentially bring a complaint to the Olmstead Commission and they could look at it. So it would be like a next level up in my mind. That's how I would see it would work. And as far as PNA having access to Olmstead inquiries, I would view any Olmstead inquiries as something that our coordinator would need to talk to our co-chairs about and decide how to handle. If they decide that they want to bring a different commission member in, including PNA, I would say that's up to them. But, you know, I think we'd want to respect individuals' privacy if they had an issue with any one of the organizations that are part of this board.
No, that was perfect answer. I was asked, so I mean, if there's a problem with housing, essentially, Jana would refer to housing if they haven't exhausted those
Right.
measures. If there's, I mean, if they have not in fact filed something with P&A, intake would be a referral. So this is post P&A even.
Right.
I would say so. And just the same thing with the housing example. They could, go to fair housing, and if they have a complaint with them that's not resolved, then their next step might be coming to the Olmstead Commission. So we kind of see this as the last resort for looking into the crux of the issue.
Does this referral process include assistance with or direction to file an ADA.gov complaint? Or where does it stop with the commission?
Question.
I feel like it depends on, we use the word investigate, but I think you could just as well interchange it with the word research or look into the complaint. We're not going to solve the issue for you, but hopefully we can look at what's going on and identify some possible avenues that person could explore, whether it's submitting a complaint on ada.gov or whatever else that we might come up with, so that a person can be empowered to kind of address their own issue, but with our assistance. This is how I'm imagining it. That doesn't mean that's how other people are.
That's not my initially reading it, and again, there's so many silos with other things that this would be, that things might get lost in translation if people did a complaint or an inquiry here and it didn't necessarily get the referrals back to the appropriate agencies to exhaust those administrative measures. But you've addressed that, so thank you. The TAC plan subcommittee work, in the discussion with that, did you guys address with the department or at least other contacts that were given that the department's, I'm not going to use the word refusal, but their lack of participation the first time around with this, because those funds have been exhausted and they didn't contribute? That's why that outdated data, from Sherry's report, a lot of their information they had to find from website and published documents that are outdated because the department did not contribute to the study.
So
for the state, I guess.
Going forward, I guess she had a list, of people that she had talked to or contacted and said that everybody that she was given, they had spoken or, so we mostly just gave her additional information. And I know that she made contact with the extra resources that we have given her.
This is Julie, and just more contacts to find the appropriate person that might have done the work or was a reporter. So I think finding the right person was also important. So she has updated text.
Do you guys plan to have minutes for those subcommittees so that either they can be, the meetings be observed and minutes be available for that work?
I took minutes.
Okay.
We've only met once or twice.
Once.
I have to look at my calendar. I take minutes.
And then it was just more minutes questions. You said it went out with the meeting. I didn't catch that. Will you have minutes and whatnot on the website at some point?
For this one?
For the meetings in general?
Yeah, so again, website is a work in progress and something that is new to me as far as updates and things. So I'm working on getting past minutes posted to the Olmstead website. They were attached to the meeting link of this meeting. I think it'll be okay.
And do you have that presentation that the DOJ did? Did she share
She did send it. I'll make sure that it's okay to share with everybody.
It was really good.
It was.
That's it.
Any other advisory council members with comments, questions? A couple online, can we?
There was a couple online, but I don't see anybody with their hand raised or anything.
And moving on, we will go to the public comment portion of the meeting. Any public comments on the agenda today?
not on the agenda, but it's from last meeting about the inquiry with transportation. I just want to let the commission know that Bismarck did approve funding for Bisman Transit. So,
For the non-ADA services
Yes.
portion.
yes.
It's by no means all the funding, is it, Trevor?
No, it's a temporary gap, basically until 2025. So, but I want to let you also know, I found out from the consultant, you could have another issue in Fargo, because it's gonna affect Fargo negatively because of the population census. So that could be another issue to watch.
For transportation, Trevor?
Yes, yes. Since they're a bigger population, they'll be in the 6 million or a million mark. So they'll get less money for that.
Senator Lee has her hand up.
Senator Lee?
Oh, you're muted, Senator.
I did get the information about the Bismarck Mandan, or the Bismarck improvement, which after visiting sometime with Jillian Shively about how she was going to get to work, seems to have helped with a bit of that issue. And Trevor, I'm glad to hear that it's doing part of it. I talked with Damien in vocational rehabilitation, and he's been very aware of this and helpful also, because the city has not responded before. There is a city ordinance in Bismarck that says that every licensed taxi service has to have a certain amount of disabled accessible transportation available, but there is no ordinance that requires a taxi service to be licensed, and so they are not. We have several private providers in Fargo that do a good job, and I actually felt like I was stalking somebody in order to get a phone number off one of the vans that was providing services, so I could get an email address and phone number. But the capital city needs to have that kind of service, as well as the other large communities, obviously, but so do the rural areas. And it's really a struggle for us. We just, it's just real hard to find a way in the rural areas to do this. So it's an ongoing issue. Trevor and I have talked about it before. Jillian and I have talked about it a lot, and we're doing our best to try to find a solution. But the city, in this case, I think, has an obligation as a part of the city bus system. Those cities that have city bus systems need to be cognizant of what their responsibilities are. And anybody with a taxi company, but Lyft and Uber are so popular now, and we have no regulations over them. So that isn't something that they have to do if they're all individual, self-employed drivers. So just thought that might be an interesting little background.
Carlotta?
This is Carlotta. Mental Health America this year during the springtime went around to all the different regions, visiting the human service centers as well as the recovery centers that were there locally. And the members of the recovery center in every single region talked about transportation as being one of their most difficult things in order to get services and supports. And there was a homeless gentleman that talked about what was happening in Grand Forks. And he said that there was, their community action had transportation vouchers and transportation help, but there was no transportation to the community action, and they weren't on a bus line. So there was no way for them to access it because they couldn't get transportation to get the help with transportation. So I thought that was kind of interesting to say the least. But I think this is an issue whether you're in some of the more urban areas, and then certainly if you're in the rural areas as well. So some folks were saying, boy, if we just had fixed route, that would be awesome. But even those with the fixed route were having a lot of difficulty because the routes wouldn't take them where they needed to for the transportation help. So.
I just want to add something, give it a little bit of a Minot perspective on transportation. As we talked about taxis, about a year ago, Minot's only taxi company closed.
Yes.
So we no longer have one, and I've done quite a bit of work behind the scenes on trying to figure out why and what it would take to come back. And the primary answer to why it went under was cost of insurance. Obviously, cost of fuel is one thing, but just in kind of the world that we live in today, insurance is ridiculous and it's going up. And if you're not prepared for that, prepare. There's a lot of insurances going up, property insurance, everything. And so with that, I just think that's that issue that I don't think enough people really think about is that there might need to be, I think it might end up actually being, for my friends that are legislators on this call, might end up needing to be some sort of a legislation help with that come next session, because I suspect it's going to be an issue in other cities as well, so.
If I may. That same insurance issue is what shut down transportation with a number of providers as well. There was a temporary change in how some services provided, at least by some agencies here in Bismarck at one point, and where staff members transported clients, and that came to a halt because they were being charged commercial insurance rates to use their vehicle with work. And so then transportation for those clients also ceased to exist for that service.
And if I can just make one more comment, Ryan,
Sure.
for the needy providers, that is, Carlotta, before the meeting started, that you said you got a call for that conference. I think that's part of the issue is they are not allowed by the insurance regs to bring the developmental disabled, because some do have behavioral issues and it could be a risk to their car. So that could be an issue. So it's a very hot topic with providers.
Thank you, Trevor. Any other public comments?
I don't have a public, or anything for public comment, but I just wanted to put out there if there are areas of interest or things that people want to hear about for commission meetings, to send them my way, and I will try to arrange for that to be an option for our next meetings. So you can either email me or call me, whatever works.
Will Nancy be making up?
Yes, yep. So
I couldn't hear that.
November we'll
Will
have the
Nancy
DOJ
present,
settlement,
since you get to today?
settlement agreement updates from her.
All right. Well, hearing no further comment, can adjourn the meeting, I believe.
This is Veronica, I move to adjourn.
Scott, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
I'm sure we need to leave here. Motion to adjourn.
I don't think we do, but you were kind of looking around. so
Well,
I'm gonna move
I just
this
wanted to
along.
make sure I.
All in favor?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and no matter what, I think the kind of general Robert's
Well, that was rather anticlimactic. They just shut everything off and didn't let anybody know. Wow. Interesting. Well, not really. Well, I got the name of the attorney. and Judy Lee. Good. Feel better? You look better. Good. Well, okay. I presume it's over. No, I saw him whip up close his briefcase, so I thought it was done. There's nothing there. I'm gonna leave it.